Okay, charts, scary, I know, but they're not actually that scary. I'll explain what they mean. I started with the charts because, well, actually, I probably just won't even show the numbers they're based on because, well, you can just go on CGG and check them out yourself. I have them just right above, but I thought it'd be scarier to look at the numbers on the charts. So these charts are based on results and statistics from NAL Stage 1 2021. So currently we're in stage 2. These are from stage 1. I'm using stage 1 because it's already finished. Stage 2 still has like 3 more weeks to go, so I wanted to use a complete data set. So let's just get started with the top left one, rating average versus placement. So all of the first 6 are last place to first place. So XSET, Beast Coast, Space Station Gaming, Dark Zero, TSM, Disrupt Gaming, Mirage, Sonics, and Oxygen placed 9th through 1st. So I put them in ascending order. So rating average. So what is that? That's just the CGG's player ratings for the team, and I average them out. So as you can see, Beast Coast is the lowest, but they got 8th place, not last place. XSET's is a decent bit higher. Beast Coast looks like about 0.86 and XSET's about 0.9. And then it doesn't really strictly increase, but you can see a big gap for sure between the bottom 2 and the rest of the 7. But you can sort of see the highest 2 look like the top 2 teams, and then Mirage is a little bit of an outlier. It's like the 3rd lowest, and then TSM, DG, SSG, TSM, all those in the middle. So you could kind of see what's going on here. Like a higher rating usually means better results, but definitely not strictly. So on to the next one. We have rating. This is the standard deviation of population. So I used population standard deviation rather than regular because I'm working with a complete data set rather than a sample. So what is standard deviation if you don't know? It's basically just a measure of, on average, how far the data points are from the average. So if you have a low standard deviation here, you're pretty tightly packed, like all your players are performing similarly well. And if you have a higher standard deviation, some players are performing very well or very poorly compared to the average. So as you can see, Sonics have the highest by far, and that's because they had the highest rated player in the league, Grixer, and they had this, I think Super was the 2nd lowest, so a very high standard deviation there, and you can see TSM's is very low. All their players were performing at pretty similar levels relative to other teams. And then, you know, everyone else, it's like pretty samey. XSET, Beast Coast, Disrupt, and Oxygen all look pretty close, and then Mirage, SSG, DZ are a little bit on the higher end. And so I was wondering if that was maybe indicative of a team doing well or poorly. And so something I want to look at in this video is if these results suggest anything for what's going on in stage 2. So I think where we're at after 6 weeks in stage 2 are pretty reminiscent of what the power rankings would be. So SSG in 1st, TSM in 2nd, Sonics in 3rd. I think those are probably the top 3 teams at the moment. Maybe Dark Zero's 3rd. They do have the 2nd most wins, but they're down in 5th place because of their overtime wins. So if, you know, a few of those had not gone their way, they'd be even lower. And I think the bottom 3 are probably correct as well. Beast Coast last, XSET 8th, and Oxygen 7th. And I'm referencing things you can't see on screen right now, really. And then the middle 3 are currently Disrupt, Dark Zero, and Mirage. And I don't know how to place those exactly. Like Mirage was looking very good, and they beat TSM, but then they just faltered against XSET, who were previously the last place team, but now XSET looks like they might actually be good. We'll have to see what XSET does for the rest of the stage for sure. But so I think the top 3 and the bottom 3 are well defined, and the middle 3 belong in the middle, but I don't know in what order. So my theory with the rating thing was sort of that lower standard deviation would be better. And at some point, if you looked at it, it might have looked like it was kind of true. Like TSM was very dominant, and they have the lowest standard deviation by far. Sonics are sort of a volatile team. They've done well in both stages so far, but again, yeah, very volatile. Like if some things started not going their way, I could see them doing poorly, but I can't really draw any conclusions too much based off of this. So now moving on to the 3rd chart, the top right one, the survival average versus placement. So still the x-axis is just the placement 9th through 1st, but survival rates. So these are, of course, what percentage of the time players are surviving. And XSET has the lowest, makes sense, they were the last place team. Then Beast Coast, and you'll notice in a few of these, Mirage is the 3rd worst in rating, and here in survival, and also in the next one in cost. So I think that suggests that Mirage probably overperformed the structure of the league and the structure of how you win games and get points and whatnot. It seems to be favoring them because they're not doing especially well in rounds on average. They're just winning rounds that they need to win, I guess. Moving up, we have, I guess SSG is the 4th highest survival rate. And SSG, I was hoping to see some interesting developments here, and I think we will get into it a little bit later, but it's really hard to draw any definite conclusions based on these stats because they traded out. Well, coming into the state, they had to play with Luke, their analyst, who is an alright player, but he wasn't up to snuff with the rest of the league for sure. And then they replaced him with a very, very strong player, hot and cold next stage. So I think you can see inklings of what's going on from these stats a little bit, but they are definitely brought down by the fact that they had to play with Luke. Sonics is the highest, and they got second place, and they were just barely below Oxygen as well. They were just 1 point shy. And then TSM's very high as well. They have the second highest, and again, this, I think, is one of the things that helped propel them to top 2 in the next stage. And then we have Disrupt and Oxygen are very high as well. Disrupt, I think their stats are really good overall. In a lot of these categories we're fine, but they still ended up in 4th, which was kind of a surprise to most people. I don't think anybody expected them to end 4th place that stage. And I think right now they're sitting in 6th place? 6th place, yeah, for stage 2. And so you can kind of see what's going on there. Of course, more survival is better, sort of trends up. If you get rid of Disrupt, Mirage, and Oxygen, it strictly trends up, which is kind of cool, but, you know, eliminating a third of the data set to get that conclusion isn't great. But we'll move on. So we have cost, percent average versus placement. Now, cost means KOST, which is kills, objectives, survives, trades. So it is the percentage of rounds in which a player gets a kill, plants the diffuser, or disables the diffuser, survives the round, or are traded shortly after they're killed. And then, of course, it's averaged once again, all 5 players on the team. So we have Beast Coast are the worst by far at like 55%, and XSET they're pretty close to Mirage here, and they're, again, a lot higher than Beast Coast. So I think based off all these stats, you can look at it. It looks like XSET was the better team than Beast Coast in the first stage. And again, just the way games play out and the league is formatted and all this stuff, it just favored Beast Coast a little bit more. I also think it helped a lot that Beast Coast was able to get that win on TSM week 1. They were able to surprise everybody and beat TSM, and that really helped them and hurt TSM. And I think they were just 3 points ahead of XSET. So if they just straight up lost that game, they would have been tied at the bottom. But I think Beast Coast had the head-to-head. Then we have SSG, actually the second highest cost, and I think that goes to show part of the reason why they were able to do so well in the current stage, in stage 1. And then DZ, TSM, Oxygen are all pretty high, and again, Mirage is, I think it's a little bit higher than XSET. I can't quite tell. It looks like it. So same kind of thing there. Mirage seem to be overperforming. XSET seem to be slightly underperforming. I think based off all these stats, TSM heavily underperformed this stage, stage 1. But you can sort of see the trend. But actually, there's like a strict downtrend for SSG all the way through Mirage, which is a little bit interesting. And then cost, standard deviation, same thing as before. It's the average deviation from the average kind of thing. TSM's, again, is very, very tight. So not only is their rating very tight, but their cost is as well, and it makes sense because cost is probably the biggest contributor to rating. I think I calculated it out, and it was like almost a perfect, you multiplied rating by a certain number and you were like pretty close to the cost in every case. So it's definitely the biggest factor. I don't know what else they use to get the rating number, but it's mostly cost. But as you can see here, you know, the top 2 teams are the 2 highest in standard deviation. And I thought going into this that might not be the case, but it seems that you want sort of talismanic players pulling big numbers. Like Kino did very well this stage for Oxygen, Grixer did very well for Sonics, Hot and Cold did very well for Mirage. I think Bolts and Rampy both were really good for Space Station, and Shuttle was really good for Disrupt. And whereas for TSM, they had, I think Achieved was like top 5 rated, or definitely top 10, if not top 5. And then all their players were pretty highly rated. I think it was like below as the lowest, and he was still at like 0.99, I don't know, 0.96, whatever it was. So anyways, not a ton to get from there. I think, again, it's like sort of representation of how volatile they are. Like, I think TSM just did poorly this stage, and in future they would be very tight in their results. And I think that was proven, as they were the highest ranking United States team at the 6th Invitational, and they're also doing very well in the current stage. But then interestingly, XSET and Beast Coast are like fairly low, and they did poorly. So I think probably it'd be some sort of bell curve sort of thing in a lot of scenarios, like where the really good teams are lower, but also the really bad teams are lower because all their players are getting destroyed. But maybe not. I don't know. It's sort of hard to tell. So again, I don't think any of these graphs are terribly conclusive. I think altogether they help paint a little bit of a picture, but I'm just sort of analyzing what I got out of these. A lot of these I threw together and then I just kept them. There were a few that weren't helpful at all, so I deleted. And also I just wanted to have 9 so I could fit them all on the screen and have them be big and whatnot. So moving on, the 6th one, we have KPR average versus placement. Now KPR just stands for kills per round, average throughout the team. Beast Coast is the worst, and then XSET and Mirage is actually pretty high here compared to all their other stuff. Oxygen's is the best, and they got first place. SQ, I think Disrupts is a little bit higher, and then SSG is pretty high as well. And SSG had two absolute killers this stage, Foltz and Rampy, especially in entry kills, went insane. But anyways, like you could see the bottom two, and then it sort of trends up. You ignore XSET, Space Station, and Disrupt, it trends strictly up. So it's a little bit cool, you know. More kills means more rounds usually. Not that many rounds are won by objective play. And then moving on, so these last three I kind of like. KPR average versus survival. So now we're not looking at placement anymore. Basically, you want to be at the top right because it means you're getting a lot of kills per round and you're surviving a lot. And the bottom left, it's the opposite. And I threw in a trend line there, and XSET's right on the trend line. Disrupt and Dark Zero are pretty close to the trend line. So again, I think this indicates, although Beast Coast has a little bit higher survival, I think XSET's higher KPR average tips the scales in their favor. So I want to say Beast Coast looks the worst on this graph, and then XSET, and then Mirage, Space Station, Dark Zero, Disrupt, Oxygen, TSM, and Sonics. So Sonics look the best by far, I would say, based off this graph. Yeah, Sonics, they got second place in this stage, and the current stage they're in third place, so they've just been a very good team. TSM, as I was saying before, I think they were heavily underrated this stage. Oxygen, a little bit different. They did very well in this stage. They definitely declined, like they were, you know, first place here, and then they were the second highest US team at the Invitational, and now they're bottom 3 in NA at the moment. And then Disrupt, they got fourth place here, and they're in fourth place. And Dark Zero, SSG, they were tied in points at, what was it, fifth place. They were like 5th, 6th, 7th were TSM, Dark Zero, and Space Station, and based off tiebreakers and round differential and stuff, it ended up in a certain order. And then Mirage, again, down there. So I think you can establish pretty well a power ranking based off all this, if nothing else, which is sort of what I'm going for. If you watched the previous video, the Critical Siege Theory 1, I sort of said I wanted to figure out how teams were good, and I guess, you know, powerful is the same thing. The power rankings for all the teams and whatnot. The next one, percent kills in rounds 1 versus KPR average. Super and Jobro from the Sonics have a website called, I think it's called like spr.gg, but it's Siege Pro Ratings, I believe. And they track the percent of kills that players got in rounds that they won versus the percent of their kills that they got in rounds that they lost. So of course you want to be getting kills in rounds you win, because that means your kills are contributing to your winning. If you get kills in rounds that you lose, that means your kills did not contribute to you winning the round. Maybe theoretically it should have made it easier for you to win, but you did not win based off it. So in the end, those kills didn't matter. So Beast Coast is actually the highest. I think there's of course going to be outliers here. If you lose a lot of rounds, you win a lot of rounds, it's going to skew the results, and Beast Coast lost a lot of rounds. So I guess probably this suggests that in a lot of the rounds that they lost, they just got crushed. Players were not getting kills. And in the rounds they won, of course, they had to get kills to win them. So keep that in mind. And the XSET is by far the lowest. So I guess they were getting a lot of impactless frags. They were getting a lot of kills in rounds that they lost, and that offset the kills that they got in rounds that they won, of course. They were good at getting kills, just not good at winning, I suppose, something like that. And then Dark Zero is the next highest, and it's like Disrupt, TSM, and Mirage is a little bit cut off, but you can see where it should be. It's right where the Space Station tag is for their dot. And Space Station's is the second lowest, so they were getting a lot of impactless frags. And again, I think the whole Luke thing makes you kind of want to throw this out the window. It's not useful for seeing where the team would be in the future that much, because we're averaging stats. If you looked at just the other player stats, like maybe it's a different story. But then of course we also have to consider the other axis on this. And the main reason I like this chart a lot is, although XSET is very poor in the percent kills in rounds 1, their KPR sort of makes up for it. It depends how you wanna say. You could sort of draw concentric circles here, or, well, I guess just concentric arcs, not the full circle. You wouldn't be able to see the full circle. But, you know, if you drew a line sort of from the top left through Beast, you know, a rounded line, an arc, through Beast Coast and XSET, you could see that. And then there's sort of the next tier up, which is Dark Zero, TSM, Mirage, and Space Station. They're all sort of on that line. And then Sonics and Disrupt are like pretty close. You can sort of, you know, they're not going to be on the same line, but they're pretty close to the same line. And then Oxygen is on the highest tier. So I thought that was kind of interesting to note. These two stats in combination illustrate that sort of picture. Like Oxygen was the best team, so they're the highest there. Beast Coast and Xset were the lowest teams, so they're there. And then Disrupt, a little bit of an outlier. They're 4th place, but they're the 2nd there. And then Sonics was the 2nd place, so they're in a tier of their own. So if you ignore Disrupt here, ignoring only one of the team's results, it draws a pretty good picture. DZ, TSM, Mirage, and Space Station. Again, if you ignore Disrupt, then those 4 teams are all next to each other. So Disrupt was 4, so ignore them. So 3, 5, 6, and 7 are all on the same tier, and then you move up to 2nd place, and then you move up to 1st place. So I like that quite a bit. And then moving on to the last graph, we have cost % average, and I tried a few things for this to see if I could find any sort of pattern. Rating gives you a pretty similar result, but I think this picture was just a little bit better. So cost % average versus stage 2 week 6 standings. So these are the current, as of time of recording, the current standings for NAL, the current stage, and it's compared to the cost from stage 1. So take this with a little bit of grain of salt. So I'm seeing if there's a correlation between how well the players on each team played on average in the 1st stage and how well the teams are doing in the 2nd stage. I think that's a polynomial line of best fit, because a linear one I don't think drew exactly what I wanted. But you can sort of see like where teams are along. Like Beast Coast, as I was saying before, would sort of be the lowest in the power ranking, then Xset, and then Oxygen, because they're in 7th place for the current stage. And they're a little bit higher than Disrupt there, and they're quite a bit higher than Mirage. So a few outliers, but you could sort of see what's going on. Like it gets better and better as we go, and then it drops down a little bit with TSM and SSG, but it's a pretty good line of best fit, I think. You can see teams getting better and better, and like I was saying, Mirage has been an outlier this whole time, and you can actually see SSG with the highest cost, well, no, 2nd highest cost. I guess Sonics is a little bit higher, but you can see the top 3 teams from stage 2 had the 3 highest. No, I think 3 of the 4 highest costs, because it looks like Dark Zero is a little bit higher than TSM. It's a pretty tight pattern, so I liked it quite a bit. But I think all of this suggests a few patterns. There's some combinations that you can put together that sort of predict how well teams will do in the future, and you can definitely use this, I think, to measure how good a team is performance-wise by a metric other than standings and placements. Of course, the first 6, I was using their placement, but I was trying to show if there were patterns to suggest that teams placed where they should have placed. And of course, sometimes they didn't, and sometimes they did. So I think the biggest outliers in all of these, TSM heavily underrated, Xset better than Beast Coast, but still bottom 2. So the bottom 2 should be switched, but other than that, they're correct. SSG underperformed, and OXG overperformed. Or no, I wouldn't say that they overperformed here. I think they did as well as they should have here, but they have definitely fallen off. You can see that. Sonics have remained consistently good. Mirage overrated. Disrupt, yeah, about middle of the pack. And maybe they're even underrated a bit. Like some of their stats are pretty high here, and they only got 4th. So they're probably about right, if not a little bit underrated. So I guess that's going to be about it. I know this is a really long video, and if anybody got to the end, I mean, that's super cool. I hope some people got something out of the video, like they understood what I was saying, and it taught them a little bit maybe. So that's going to do it.